My family decided it would be hilarious to leave me lost in the middle of the highway screaming for help. Let's see how long it takes him to find his way out. They laughed and left me behind. I didn't. Come back in 10 years later, they still regret it. I'm 33 now, but this all happened when I was 23, it feels like. It's been a lifetime, but I can still remember every detail like it was yesterday. I know this might sound dramatic, but trust me, it wasn't until years later that I realized just how much that day changed everything between me and my family. A little background. I'm the second child. My older brother, Ethan, was always the outgoing one. He had the whole cool guy persona. Down athletic, popular, charming. I, on the other hand, preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Liked reading, playing games, and keeping to myself. My family always gave me that. Looked like I was too boring or quiet. I never seemed to measure up, and as time went on, I got used to being the odd one out. My parents were loving, sure, but I always felt like I was in Ethan's shadow, and I think they didn't really know what to do with me. So one summer, we decided to go on a road trip upstate. Honestly, I was a little hesitant about it, but I thought it would be a nice change of pace, just a chance to get away from the usual routine. We piled into the car, and it started off pretty well, at least on the surface. We were driving through the countryside windows down the usual small talk, but even then I could feel something was off. My mom kept fussing over me, making sure I was comfortable, and had enough snacks. I brushed it off as her usual overprotectiveness, but my dad and Ethan, they were a little too quiet, too focused on something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Eventually, we hit a stretch of highway where it was just us and the road for miles. My dad pulled over to the side saying he wanted to take a break. We'd been driving for a while, so I didn't think much of it. Ethan and I both got out, but instead of doing his usual, let's stretch out and get moving, Ethan just stood there, kind of staring off into the distance. I thought it was weird, but whatever. Everything okay, Ethan? Asked. He just gave me this look like he knew something I didn't, and then shrugged. Yeah, just needed a breather. My mom and dad, meanwhile, were whispering to each other in the front seat. It wasn't uncommon for them to have their little conversations, but this time it felt different. It felt like they were talking about something important, something they didn't want me to hear at that moment. I had a strange feeling that they were leaving something out, but I pushed the thought aside. Then all of a sudden, my dad turned to me and said, "Hey, why don't you grab a drink from the back?" I was about to walk over when I noticed Ethan already heading toward the front of the car, opening the passenger door. And that's when it happened without warning. My dad started the car and pulled away, slowly at first, like he was just maneuvering to park somewhere else, but then they started picking up speed. I watched completely confused as the car continued to roll forward, leaving me behind. I called out, "Wait, what are you guys doing?" But they didn't stop. I froze for a moment, unsure if this was some kind of joke, but no, they weren't. Coming back, I could see my dad's face in the rearview mirror, and he didn't look back. Ethan was turned slightly, but he didn't seem phased. "What are you doing?" I shouted, running after the car, my heart pounding, but they just kept going, and before long, they were nothing but a speck on the horizon. I stood there, trying to process what just happened. It wasn't like them. Well, okay, it was like them to play pranks, but they wouldn't just leave me there, right? I tried calling, but of course, no signal, and I had no idea which direction to walk in. I mean, sure, I could have turned around and walked back toward the highway, but it felt like they were just gone. I felt this knot in my stomach. Was this a prank? Was I just being overdramatic? But the longer I stood there, the more I realized it wasn't a joke. They had left me after. Standing there for what felt like forever, I started walking. I figured if I just kept moving, something would come up. Maybe I'd find a gas station or a house. But as the minutes turned into an hour and the trees started to look more and more the same, I realized how stupid I'd been. I'd walked away from the car with no idea where I was going. I didn't have a map, no phone signal, and no way of knowing what direction to go. The whole situation felt surreal. I couldn't even fathom why they would do this. Sure, my family was a bit messed up, but it didn't make sense. Were they mad at me? Did I do something to deserve this? Tried to think back to earlier that day, but it felt like everything had been normal. Nothing seemed off. Eventually, the sky started to darken, and I realized I'd been walking for hours. My legs were sore, and my throat was dry. The thought of sitting down crossed my mind, but couldn't shake the idea that if I stopped, they might never come back for me. I had to keep moving. The idea of being out there alone with no one even looking for me, it started to feel less like a prank and more like something darker. That's when I saw something, a faint light in the distance. It wasn't much, but it gave me hope. A gas station, maybe, or even a house. I picked up the pace, but the closer I got, the more I realized it wasn't a gas station. It wasn't a house. It was their car parked at the side of the road, and there they were, my mom, dad, and Ethan sitting in the car laughing. I could feel my heart racing in my chest as I stood there, staring at their car parked at the side of the road like it was just another regular stop, but there was nothing regular about this. My mom's laughter reached my ears first, high-pitched, fake, like she was trying to hold it back, but couldn't. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Ethan was next to her, leaning back in the passenger seat with a grin plastered across his face. My dad was behind the wheel looking calm, like he didn't just drive me halfway to nowhere. They all looked so comfortable. Too comfortable it took a few seconds. For my legs to stop shaking enough for me to move, my mouth felt dry and my chest tightened, but I finally walked toward them feeling like a kid again. Like I was somehow in trouble, but I didn't even know why. I couldn't understand it. This wasn't like them, was it? As I got closer, I heard my mom speak. First, her tone just a little too casual. Well, look who decided to show up, she said. But it wasn't kind, it was condescending. Are you guys seriously joking right now? I said, my voice sounding angrier than I intended. What was that? You just left me out there alone? Ethan's grin widened, and my dad didn't even look at me. He just stared ahead, hands loosely on the steering wheel, like nothing had happened. My mom sighed as if I were being overly dramatic. Oh, relay, it wasn't that bad, she said, rolling her eyes. We thought you could use a little adventure. Chance to see how well you can navigate without us. Are you kidding me? Demanded, taking a step forward. You left me stranded. I couldn't even call you. There was no signal, no one around. You seriously thought that was funny? Well, clearly you found your way here, didn't you? My dad finally chimed in, his tone flat and dismissive. Maybe this will teach you to be more self-sufficient. That's when I noticed it. They weren't just acting like this was a joke. They were actually enjoying it, every single one of them. Ethan kept glancing at me with this smug expression on his face, like he had just scored some victory. My mom was still smiling, but it wasn't a real smile. It was a grin that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that made my stomach churn. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the realization that I had already been humiliated enough. Maybe it was the sudden and crushing thought that I had never mattered enough to them for them to even consider what it might feel like to be abandoned in the middle of nowhere. You think this is funny? I said, quietly, my voice trembling now with a mix of disbelief and hurt leaving me out. There, like that I could have. God, I don't even know what could have happened. We weren't that far away, my mom said, waving a hand dismissively. You knew where the road was. We weren't going to leave you in danger. Yeah, right, I muttered, looking around. Then why didn't you come back for me? Ethan leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Let's just say we wanted to see if you could handle it. You always act like the world owes you something, like you're above all this. Maybe you needed a little reality check. The words hit me harder than I expected. They felt like a slap to the face. I wasn't sure which part of it bothered me more, the fact that they thought this was some sort of test, or the realization that I had been so clueless, so naive that I thought maybe they just had a weird sense of humor. Swallowed hard. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, my voice steadier now. I'm done. The silence that followed was thick. Ethan's grin faded, and my mom's eyes narrowed. But it was my dad who finally spoke up, his voice low and serious for the first time since we'd started this ridiculous ordeal. You're being dramatic again, he said, the edge to his tone cutting through the quiet. This was supposed to be fun. If you can't handle a little joke, that's your problem, not ours. A knot formed in my throat as I tried to process everything. Fun? A joke? Couldn't even begin to understand what they were thinking, but I knew something. In that moment, I wasn't welcome here. Not in the way they wanted. I wasn't a part of their fun anymore. I turned around, slowly, my back to them. I wasn't even sure where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from them. Where are you going? My mom called after me, her voice laced with annoyance. I don't know, I said, without turning around, but it's not with you. That night, I walked down that highway until I couldn't see their car anymore. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed space. I needed time to think. Maybe I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back to them. Not after that. It was weird how something as simple as a car ride, a little stop on the side of the highway, could be the thing that finally broke me. But in that moment, I realized I had been living in a family that had no respect for me, and that, I think, is what hurt the most. Over the next few days, I thought about it over and over again. Knew I could never go back to how things were before. The trust had been broken beyond repair, and I was done pretending I could just fit in with their games. It wasn't just the stunt they pulled that day that broke me. It was what happened after I thought maybe they'd feel guilty eventually, that they'd call or show up at my door with some apology, but instead, they acted like nothing happened, like it was just a fun, twisted game. And that was the worst part: their complete indifference to the hurt they caused. My parents, at least, were too prideful to ever admit they'd done something wrong. Ethan, well, he was a different breed. He always believed he was untouchable. Stayed away. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They were my family after all, but what I learned about myself during that time was that I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for. I didn't need them. Could make my own way, but that didn't mean I forgot what they'd done years past. I moved away, found a decent job, started building a life I didn't want anything to do with them, but every now and then they would send a text or leave a voicemail. They'd ask how I was doing, how life was treating me. They'd drop little comments like, Ethan's doing so well, you should really come visit him sometime. Or it's a shame we can't all be together for holidays anymore. Could hear the underlying guilt in their voices, but I didn't give in, not once. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that my mom had been talking about me to her friends. Apparently, she had told them that I was estranged and difficult to reach. Ethan, on the other hand, painted himself as the good son, the one who could do no wrong. He had his own family, now a wife and 2 kids, and my mom loved showing them off to anyone who would listen, but there was always that underlying thing, their casual dismissal of what they'd done to me. I wasn't angry at them anymore. At least not the way I used to be. Instead, I was cold, detached. But I still felt the weight of what they'd taken from me, and if they thought I'd just let it slide, they were wrong. That's when I started thinking about how I could make them feel the consequences of their actions. It started small at first. I didn't jump into anything too drastic. I just wanted them to realize that there were consequences to treating people like disposable pawns. In their little games, I kept it subtle. At first, I reached out to a few distant family members who had always been on the fringes, people who had stayed out of the drama. I let them know about how things had gone down between us. I didn't paint myself as the victim in a way that seemed desperate. I simply told the truth. I kept it casual, just like how they would have done it. The feedback was slow at first, but soon I started hearing whispers. Words started to get around about how my family had treated me. The more I distanced myself, the more they realized they had made me the bad guy. A story that wasn't mine, and I was okay with that. Let them feel a little guilt. Didn't want their pity. I wanted them to understand what they had done. Then came the harder part. Ethan, I knew my brother. He was a creature of habit, always chasing after the latest thing that would make him seem like the perfect family man. He liked showing off his success, flaunting the life he built. So I went after the things that mattered to him most: his image, his reputation. I started by subtly showing up in places where he wasn't expecting me, places he liked to go to impress people, fundraisers, social gatherings, local events. I didn't make a scene, but I was always there. I was the ghost in the room. I made sure people knew I was there, just close enough that his perfect little world would be slightly disrupted every time he gives some speech about how great his life was, how proud he was of his kids. I just slip in and out, letting people know how things had really been. Between us, it was a small thing, but it was enough. His friends started to ask him questions he didn't want to answer. Hey, is everything okay with your brother? Heard you guys had a falling out, little things like that. It was nothing malicious at first, but eventually it wore on him. His life wasn't as perfect as he liked to pretend. People started to notice, and the cracks began to show. His image built on the facade of family perfection was starting to crumble. I could see it in his eyes. When I bumped into him at the grocery store one evening, he was trying to keep that cool, confident exterior, but I could tell it was starting to get to him. But that was just the beginning. The real fun started when I set my sights on my parents. My mom had always prided herself on her social circle, her perfect group of friends who were more like an extended family to her. She'd always be on the phone with them, gossiping about anyone who didn't fit into her idea of how life should look. But what my mom didn't realize was that I had one of those friends in my corner, a woman who years ago had confided in me about how my mom had said some not so flattering things about her. Things about her weight, and even her marriage. My mom had always been so quick to tear people down behind their backs, and I knew this woman had been hurt by it. I didn't act on it. Immediately, I didn't want to look petty. But one night, after one too many just checking in texts from my mom, I decided to reach out to this woman. I told her everything I knew. I didn't ask for her help, but I knew she'd take the opportunity. She always did the next time my mom called. She was talking to the woman on the other end of the line. Except it wasn't just a friendly chat, it was a confrontation. My mom's friend told her everything she had ever said about her, about other people in the circle, about how my mom had always pretended to be perfect when she was anything but it. Didn't take long for the fallout to hit. My mom's social life began to collapse. Her friends started drifting away, canceling plans, ignoring her calls. She didn't understand what was happening. At first, she'd always been the queen bee, after all, but slowly she began to realize the truth, the things she'd said, the way she treated people. It all came back to bite her. The past decade has been a strange mix of peace and resentment. Peace for me because I had stopped letting them dictate my life, but resentment because I never got that real apology. The thing is, I didn't need an apology to move on. I just needed to prove to myself that I could be better off without them. I'm not going to lie. Watching their lives crumble a little has been satisfying, but not in the way I thought it would be. I didn't plan on destroying them, just making them realize that they couldn't keep treating me like I was nothing. But now that things are where they are, I've started to wonder if I went too far. Ethan's marriage has been on the rocks ever since I started showing up at those events. His friends started questioning him more than he was comfortable with, and even his wife started asking him what was going on. He's distant now, bitter. And when we do speak, He always has that edge in his voice like I'm the one who did something wrong. It's ironic, really, considering how he's been the golden child all his life. As for my mom, she's practically a social outcast. Now her circle of friends has dwindled to almost nothing. I didn't want to ruin her life, but I wanted her to feel the weight of the lies she'd spread about people, including me. Now she's lonely, constantly trying to make amends, but too proud to apologize. Her calls have stopped being about guilt, and now they're full of anger like I'm the one who's done something wrong. My dad, well, he's just numb. He goes about his days as if nothing ever happened, never bringing up anything serious, but I can see it in the way he looks at me, like he knows I'm not coming back into the fold. So here I am. I've cut ties, built a life without them, and in some ways I'm doing better. But I've started to feel guilty. Maybe I went too far with the revenge. Maybe I should have just let it go and lived my life without trying to make them feel the same hurt they caused me. I know I've hurt them. I can't deny that, but did I go too far? Was it really worth it? I haven't spoken to any of them in a while, and I've been wondering, am I the a-hole here? What do you all think? Should I have just let the whole thing slide, or do I deserve to get some form of closure even? If it means hurting them a little along the way, would love to hear your thoughts.